Welcome to our presentation about the crime of the century, the Unabomber case. 16 bombs, 3 dead, and 23 injured. From 1978 to 1995, Ted Kaczynski terrorized the American public through mail. In this presentation, we'll break down and analyze the FBI's largest, longest, and most costly manhunt and explain why we think it's the crime of the century. Theodore Ted Kaczynski grew up in Chicago, Illinois. He finished high school at the age of 15 and enlisted in Harvard at the age of 16. His IQ was measured to be 167. From 1959 to 1962, he was part of an experiment connected to the CIA project MK-Ultra, where he was repeatedly put under psychological pressure. This project was to explore human mind control. He finished his master's degree in mathematics and taught at the University of Michigan for 3 years. Even though he had great offers for his future, he quit in 1969 without any explanation. In 1971, he moved to the town of Great Falls, Montana, and started to build a wooden cabin outside of town. This cabin and the lands he had acquired around it were where he had lived until his arrest in 1996. This psychological pressure in his early years were later linked to his crimes, and the isolation and simple lifestyle in nature reflected Ted's philosophy and stance on society, but we'll get into that later. As I mentioned before, the Unabomber, Theodore John Kaczynski, carried out a nationwide bombing campaign in the United States from 1978 to 1995. He targeted individuals associated with universities, airlines, and modern technology. During his bombings, there were 3 fatalities, 23 injuries, and it lasted for 17 years. His bombs were handmade, increasingly sophisticated, and designed to be untraceable, often built from scrap materials to avoid forensic detection. Kaczynski's target selection seemed arbitrary. His victims weren't personally known to him. Instead, he selected them through library research. He chose people connected to universities, airline companies, and to technological development. His reasons as to why we'll go over later. This randomness amplified public fear as the attacks appeared unpredictable. The bomb construction was one of the most impressive parts of his crime. He built the bombs from common materials to avoid traceability in his cabin. He was completely secluded from society and basically built the bombs from scratch. His bombs also became more sophisticated over time, and he often booby-trapped them to detonate upon opening. This was because he mailed the bombs through the U.S. Postal Service. So when he mailed the packages, people would open them and they'd explode upon opening. Sometimes he also hand-delivered devices left in public places. At one point, he threatened to blow up an airliner, prompting national aviation security alerts. His operation style was pretty unique. He worked entirely alone. He had no accomplices. This is often called lone wolf terrorism. And as I mentioned before, he lived in an isolated 10 by 14 foot cabin in Montana without electricity or running water. And still, he left almost no forensic advice or evidence like fingerprints. People often link his extreme intelligence and his IQ of 167 to his ability to build these bombs entirely from scratch in an isolated cabin without electricity. That's also what made it so hard for the FBI to catch him.
After multiple bomb attacks, the most difficult and longest investigation for the FBI started. After a short time, the investigators saw that all the bombs were built in a similar way. Because of that, they knew that all the attacks were committed by the same person. Many bombs were sent to universities and airport workers. That's why the FBI named the perpetrator Unabom, and that stands for University and Airline Bomber, later known as the Unabomber. Because the perpetrator didn't leave any traces, it was very difficult to find hints of who he possibly could be. He sends the bombs from different locations and often uses wrong names. Besides that, the bombs are very meticulously made. so there are only little hints left. The investigators examined every bomb closely. In the process, they found a few special features. For example, many bombs contain parts of wood, and other parts there's an abbreviation FC. The technical part of the bombs was well constructed, what shows that the perpetrator seems to be very intelligent and has a lot of technical knowledge. Even with those long-going investigations, the perpetrator still wasn't found. Thousands of people were checked and experts from different areas were gathered to help with the search, but without any success.
An important moment didn't come until 1995. In this year, the Unabomber sent a long document to multiple newspapers. This document is called the Manifest. In it, the perpetrator explained his ideas about the technology and society. He demanded that the manifest needs to be published. If the newspapers wouldn't print this, he threatened with more bombings. After long discussions, the FBI and the American government decided that the manifest should be published. They hoped that some would recognize the writing style. The manifest finally appeared in big American newspapers. The title was Industrial Society and Its Future. Just after the publishing, a man reports at the FBI. His name was David Kaczynski. While reading the manifest, he had the feeling that the text could have been written by his own brother, Ted Kaczynski. David noticed that many formulations and ideas were very similar, whereas letters that his brother wrote back in the old days. Therefore, he gave the FBI the old text from Ted. Language experts compared the documents with the manifest. They realized that the written style was very similar to each other's. Ted Kaczynski was therefore the most important suspect. Finally, the investigators got a search warrant. At the 3rd of April 1996, an FBI team drove to Ted Kaczynski's hut. As they arrived, Kaczynski was alone. The agents arrested him and started the search. In the hut, investigators found important evidence, like bomb fragments, tools to build a bomb, and many handwritten notes of his attacks. In addition, they discovered finished bombs and an original manuscript of the famous manifest. This discovery confirmed that Ted Kaczynski was, in fact, the Unabomber. After almost 20 years of investigation, the perpetrator could finally be arrested. Overall, the Unabomber of Ted Kaczynski finished one of the longest and most famous terrorist incidents in the history of the USA.
The reasons why Ted Kaczynski bombed professors and others were rooted in his strong opposition to modern technology and industrial society. He believed that technological progress was limiting human freedom and forcing people to depend on large systems such as governments, universities, and corporations. In his view, these systems controlled people's lives and removed their ability to live independently. Because of these beliefs, he saw scientists, engineers, and university professors as people who were helping to expand the technological society that he opposed. Kaczynski believed that peaceful protests would not work because society ignored criticism of technology. As a result, he believed that violence was the only way to force people to pay attention to his message. By targeting universities and airlines, he hoped to strike institutions connected to scientific progress and technological development. His ultimate goal was to spread his ideas to the public. He wanted major newspapers to publish his manifesto so that people would read his arguments against modern industrial society. Authorities collected physical evidence from crime scenes, including fragments of metal, wood, and other materials used in his bombs. These pieces were analyzed in laboratories to look for fingerprints, tool marks, or other clues about where the materials came from. Investigators also interviewed witnesses, tracked delivery routes, looked for suspicious packages, and gathered tips from the public. Over time, thousands of leads were investigated, and a special task force worked full time on the case. In the trial of Ted Kaczynski,
the prosecution argued that Kaczynski was responsible for a series of mail bombings carried out between 1978 and 1995 that killed 3 people and injured many others. They presented strong physical and written evidence, including materials found in his remote Montana cabin that matched the bombs used in the attacks. Investigators also showed that the manifesto published in newspapers closely matched Kaczynski's writing style and ideas. Additionally, his brother had reported him to the authorities after recognizing the manifesto. The defense, however, focused on Kaczynski's mental health and argued that he had suffered from severe psychological issues that affected his actions and thinking. His lawyers attempted to portray him as a highly intelligent but deeply troubled individual who was isolated from society. Kaczynski himself rejected the insanity defense because he did not want to be labeled as mentally ill, and eventually he pled guilty to avoid the death penalty, receiving life in prison without parole.